I'm just tweeting out what we're doing. Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks so much for joining us for the final day of our series called A More Perfect Union, our 3-day virtual festival. We've been very fortunate to have a terrific group of speakers over the past 2 days, and we continue the streak today with leading health officials, civil rights activists, members of Congress, and many more joining us to discuss our nation's pursuit of a more perfect union. That's what we should be doing. Just as we've been for the last 2 days, we're going to be bringing you multiple sessions of programming, and each day is divided into 3 segments. First is Rise. That's what we're doing now. Then there's Focus in the afternoon, and then finally Reveal. Today's segments will take a deep dive into advancing justice in society, protecting against cyber threats, the future of education, and moving our health systems forward. All of these issues matter. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Microsoft and Southern Company, for their support of this festival and these conversations. And before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events, but more importantly is the hashtag. The hashtag is #TheHillAMPU. That's The Hill, A More Perfect Union. We're broadcasting live, and we'll take your questions throughout the program. I use them, so please send them to me, and I will pose them to the folks we're talking to. And if you experience any trouble with the live stream, don't clobber your computer. Just refresh the page. We begin today with a look at the state of equality and justice across the nation and the steps that could lead to meaningful change. We're going to hear from leading activists and change makers for a conversation on catalyzing systemic change and advancing justice at all levels of society, or at least we hope. I'm especially happy to be joined by my great colleague from the newsroom, Aris Folley, to help lead these conversations. She's very cool, much cooler than I am. Aris, over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Excited to be here. To get things off, I'm going to be joined by Janet Murguía, the president and CEO of UnidosUS, the nation's largest Hispanic civil rights and advocacy organization. Welcome, Janet.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, go ahead, Janet. Bring the camera back. Hi, Janet. I just need to say hello. Okay, now go back to what you're doing.
Hi, Janet.
So, hey.
How are you?
Wonderful. Trying to keep up with all the fast-moving developments on Capitol Hill today.
Right. There's a lot. I know that among a list of issues your organization has long advocated for is education equity, and you recently met with Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona. What are some of the things that you spoke to him about?
Well, we were first really excited to host Dr. Miguel Cardona, a Latino education secretary, and someone who has actually come from a history of being a teacher, a school principal, and an administrator, and working with an inclusive racial equity lens. So it was really exciting. But we were able to talk to him about some of the most challenging issues we're seeing for children of color, students of color, but in particular Latino students. And college completion has been one of the biggest challenges. We made a lot of progress in the last decade with high school graduation rates, and we're seeing our students transition to college, but what's happening is they're not fully able to complete college. And that's why a lot of the community college bridging that happens is so critically important for Latino students, and making sure they have the supports that they need to make sure they're getting the credits that they can when they transfer from college, community college, to a 4-year institution, but also just making sure they end up with that degree. And that's not happening. A lot of them are falling out in college. So with the recent pandemic, there's even been more challenges as students have had not as many supports as they should when they've been trying to study from home. And so we talked about a number of those issues related to college completion, but also just language issues. There's still a lot of English learners that are 20% of the K through 12 student body in this country, and we just need to make sure those supports are there for them to fully succeed. So a number of issues.
Right. And I mean, how should we be investing in our nation's students, do you think, in a way that would be both equitable and inclusive?
Well, for us, I think it starts with making sure there is leadership at the national level and making sure that we do have a secretary and administration that understands those supports are important. So the funding for higher education becomes really important, those supports. And I know that in this Build Back Better package, they're talking about some of the investments for minority serving institutions as well, like HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges. all of those are going to be particularly important because they have a lot of the understanding and supports for those students, but obviously just investments in making sure we can have college completion is really important. And again, different titles of the Higher Education Act are important, but we also want to make sure there's investments in K through 12 that are supporting those students either through help with supports for language and English language learners.
Right. And I know that Democrats, as you said before, are currently working on this massive reconciliation plan to enact chunks of the president's Build Back Better agenda. Your organization has been among the groups that have been helping lead the charge on trying to keep immigration reform in the reconciliation package. What is your message to Congress right now on building back better with regards to immigration reform in the budget reconciliation plan?
Well, Aris, as you know, there were a number of Latinos and immigrants who stepped up as essential workers during the pandemic. In fact, we know that only 16% of Latinos and Latinas were able to work from home during the pandemic, and that 70% of Hispanics made up essential workers. Many of them contributed in important ways, but many of them are part of immigrant families. And we saw immigrants uniquely step up, even though it was a great risk to their lives and their families, but they kept the economy going. So we think it's important for us to invest in that workforce and make sure they have a full opportunity to contribute. And what that means is that we have to include immigration path to citizenship for those workers. Not only did they earn that path to citizenship by responding in the country's darkest moment to keep our economy going, but what we learned is we're going to continue to need those workers. And so it's not fair to have them have to look over their shoulder after many of them have been here for over a generation, and make sure that we can secure that workforce because we're going to need it to have a full economic recovery. So we're hopeful that in the House, I know passed bill, we saw inclusions that would have a path to citizenship. We hope that that it's included in the current framework right now, and we need to make sure that it stays in that framework, especially as we go to the Senate, where the parliamentarian has a key role.
Right.
But for us, our message is there are tools to address this from a legislative mechanics, and we have to see once and for all these workers be able to continue to stay and work and have that path to citizenship. So we're counting and we're expecting that to be in the final, not just framework, but in the final legislation that is signed into law. And we've certainly been advocating it. It's the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do from a business and economic recovery standpoint.
Right. And I know that it's been decades since major immigration reform has been enacted. So I'm just curious, if immigration reform isn't tackled in this reconciliation plan, do you think it's likely we'll see major immigration reform maybe taken up through another vehicle in the near future? Or is this current plan, do you think, in your opinion, the best shot?
This is our best shot, and there's no reason why we couldn't get this provision finally in this bill. The bottom line is, Aris, we're not going to take no for an answer. We need to see this kind of relief and protections and ability for these workers to continue to contribute in a recovery where we're going to need them. So this is the shot that we need to take. And your answer is we're never going to give up. We're going to continue to fight for a path to citizenship. It's the right and smart thing to do. This is the best and most appropriate way and vehicle for us to get this relief when we need it most, for not just the community, but for the country to be able to have economic prosperity. We need this workforce right now. They've proven themselves, as we saw them really come through for the country during the pandemic, but we're going to need them for the future. And that economic prosperity will rely on them. We need to get that path of citizenship so these workers can know that they can be fully integrated into society and be full contributors.
Well, thank you so much. It was great hearing from you, and thank you for your insight just on this matter in general. Great talking to you.
Sure, Aris, and please tell Steve, my fellow Kansan, I said hello, okay?
Thanks, Janet. You know, I was very jealous when I came in this morning and saw that Aris got you today. And like, I always love our conversations. And so anyway, I had to cede the floor to my friend Aris, but thanks so much for joining us
Thank you.
as well, Janet.
Of course. Thank you all.